How's it going, everyone? And welcome to the Not a Dental podcast. I'm here with my dad, Dr. Perry. And in this episode, went over his story as not only a dentist, but a fighter pilot flying F-16. So it's a huge pleasure for me to interview my dad and excited for you guys to check it out. All right, we're here with my dad, Dr. Perry. And it's great being here with you, Dad.
Thanks. Yeah, this is a treat.
Yeah.
I hope we can look back on this time in your life and mine and, remember where we were and everything. So I'm glad we're doing this. Thanks a lot.
For sure. So I'm trying to think of, I've heard a little bit about, I don't know if you've mentioned anything about it on the podcast before, but How did you get into dentistry and then take a break to fly fighter jets?
Yeah, well, I'll take that one step at a time. How I got into dentistry. It's a good question. I was your age and I met I was your age and I was a baseball player. And there was a baseball coach, Brad Stovey, in Iowa, Marion, Iowa. Actually, I think it's Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Okay.
But those are neighboring cities. He let me shadow at his office, which is really important. Right now, I'm shadowing with a college student. College student is 2 days a week. She's at the office. And, it's been a lot of fun. And it's really important to let students shadow with you to understand your job. So he did that for me. Dr. Stovey did. I think he's still practicing. He's one of those guys that's a life learner. And he let me into his practice, which I'm really fortunate. And so thank you, Dr. Stovey. And he got me interested. My mom was a nurse. Brother is a doctor. And he was 4 years ahead of me. So there was a lot of pressure to go into medicine. I thought that's what I wanted to do. And when you're young and you love your mom and you want to just impress her or make her happy or feel like you've accomplished something, there's a lot of pressure to, go into medicine if that's what your family is interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I was going to be a doctor. I thought dentistry was like plan B or I was a failure if I was a dentist, taking it to the extreme. But I'm sure glad I did because it is a great mix of medicine and minor surgery. Nothing life-threatening, nothing too heavy. I did shadow with an orthopedic surgeon and a general physician and a hand physician too. So that's how I got into dentistry, interested in that. Yeah.
Is that something that maybe some people going into the medical field or some doctors struggle with, is that other doctors in other fields have more stress they're dealing with, life or death situations?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that you have to be careful about is some things in medicine are really heavy, like if you're an ER doctor or an orthopedic surgeon, sometimes your patients are really fragile and sick. So you have to deal with the reality of that. That might be something you need to work up towards, work into. Some people can't handle that buildup. Stress is kind of like something you work up to, kind of like exercise. It's hard to just pick up a 400-pound dumbbell or a 400-pound barbell. But if you train and learn really good techniques, you can adapt to it. I think humans can adapt to almost anything. So stress to one person who's worked up to it doesn't seem like stress to them. One person is stressed. The other person is fulfilled and happy.
Yeah.
So I can't say that it's right for everyone, Some people just absolutely love it. They feel like they're using their gifts. So am one that really I'm fortunate because dentistry makes direct impacts on people's lives, both in like mostly chewing
100%.
and smiling. So I'm helping them with their confidence when there's confidence in with their social life, and also during mealtime.
Yeah.
Tasty, crunchy, chewy foods. And you're able to give that to somebody, which is, similar to other, my brother is in ENT, ear, nose, and throat, and he's helping people breathe better.
Shout out Uncle Chris.
Shout out to Chris. Yeah. Breathe through your nose. That's also a gift. That's also something that's his gift to the world,
Mm-hmm.
And he knows that. And, so it's just, a different way to help. But yeah, that I got into dentistry as kind of like, wasn't sure about it. My parents aren't dentists. Don't have any dentists in the family. Dad was a technician, and fixed typewriters and copiers,
Mm-hmm.
and mom a nurse. So the combination of the two is, actually, if you think about it, it's a lot like dentistry. And then I'm just like everyone else. I watched Top Gun when I was a kid. In 1985, I was probably like in junior high or something like that. So I was able to absorb that and think that is the ultimate adventure movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so that affected me. I've always been interested in flying. My uncle was a pilot and took me flying when I was 16, 17, 18 years old.
Ron.
Uncle Ron.
Yeah.
In Florida. We had some great flights together. So I knew that flying was an option, both as a career, but I didn't know about the Air National Guard. And there was a Top Gun pilot that was a financial advisor, and he had retired from the Air Force, and he was working as a financial advisor. And I got an introduction to him when I was a junior in college, and went out to a pizza joint like Pizza Hut in the college town I was in.
Yeah.
And he really opened my eyes to the possibility of the Air National Guard. I didn't know anything about the Air National Guard, which is a branch of the Air Force. It's the 8th Air Force Combat Command, and it is responsible for 100% of the air sovereignty alert. So if there's anything that flies over the United States, the Air National Guard is the one responsible for it. They work with NORAD, which is North American Air Defense, and I didn't know any of that. I didn't know what the responsibilities were of the Air National Guard or the Air Force, but he told me about like what it was like to have a job as a pilot in the Air National Guard. And he said, hey, you can go to dental school, be a dentist, and then work as a pilot 2 days a week, and still you could do both, basically. Yeah. That there are citizen soldiers, they call it. So you could be a doctor, lawyer as your primary job, and then also be like a weekend warrior where you're a guardsman and a volunteer, or you get paid as a guardsman. Yeah.
But until graduating dental school, that was always just a thought, right?
Right. So I had remembered that conversation, and when I was in dental school, I thought I really wanted to go back to flying. And I'm not sure why. I think that I used to tell people that I wasn't satisfied in dentistry. I looked around in dental school, and all the students seemed to have their own plan, after dental school, to go back to their father's practice or something like that. For me, I thought that achievement as a dentist wasn't good enough, that I needed to, do something better or have a higher achievement. And what's bigger than a fighter pilot? That's to my mind, that was, a higher achievement than my brother. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds crazy, but, and it does seem foolish now because I'm beyond that now. But at the time, I think that was really driving me. And, I was thinking a lot about my mom and my brother and competing. That was, dentistry didn't seem big enough. I needed to be a fighter pilot. And I also wanted to test and see what was out there and just test my limits. So definitely flying jets did that for me.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
So why you graduate dental school though? I'm just trying to get into like that decision. Was it like a immediate decision right after graduating that you chose to
fly jets,
enroll into flight training?
Yeah. Okay. So probably the first year of dental school, we were, we were studying pretty heavy the first 2 years. At the end of the second year, I started a flying program with a local base where I flew a Piper Warrior, which is a flying program. It probably cost at that time it was about $2,000 to $3,000 to get a pilot's license, which required solo and probably 100 hours of flight time.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to become a private pilot, and I knew that I needed to become a private pilot to apply to the Air Force, Air National Guard, because this pilot told me all about the selection process. So you have to be a private pilot. You have to take a pilot admissions test, which is kind of like a combination of intelligence, but also attributes for spatial orientation.
Mm.
So north, south, east, west on a map, and then upside down.
So most people come in, they don't have that prior training or their prior license when they join flight school.
Well,
or do you need your license to apply?
Well, when you go to the Air Force Academy, during the 4-year college, they train as a private pilot. So they graduate as private pilots.
Gotcha.
And so they have to get that before they go to Air Force pilot training. They call it UPT, undergraduate pilot training. So the experience I had in dental school was the same that they had, Air Force cadets. If you're at OTC, let's say you're going to ASU and they have got Air Force officer training school there, and you become an officer and you're in ROTC at ASU.
Yeah.
They're also going to have a flying program. Like you have to probably go to a local flying club and become a pilot if you want to go to pilot training. You have to be at least a solo private pilot. So that's not hard to do. But it is a challenge, learning to take off and land by yourself at night, is a big deal.
Yeah.
When you're a college kid and no one's in the plane, you have to operate it by yourself, make all the radio calls, navigation. So you learn to become an aviator. And I did that. And I also did some work with a glider. I learned to fly a glider, which is a no engine. Obviously you get towed up to a certain altitude and they release you, and now your engine's off, and you're just gliding and you have to find a place to land. And that's also a stick and rudder type of flying. So it's a little different than a Cessna or a Piper. So I got as many flight hours as I could to get prepared for that. I didn't know if I was going to become accepted into the Air National Guard. I hadn't even taken the aptitude test. I think I was taking so many tests in dental school. Every week we had a testing, and we had a lot of spatial orientation. We had to do modeling, and all of that created probably the best preparation that I could imagine, because I really scored well on that aptitude test. I think my pilot score was 91, which was about as high as it gets in the curve. So because I had such good scores, some pilot test scores in pilot training, they were only at 17. I was at 91. So I didn't know that I had scored so high, but it kind of explains that I got interviews all over the country, because I got interviewed by Iowa, Indiana, Wisconsin, and California. They all wanted to meet me.
Wow.
So I selected Wisconsin because it was close to the University of Iowa. And each guard base only took 2 pilots per year, roughly, because they were losing pilots to retirement and to the airlines. That was back in the early 2000s. So the airlines were doing pretty good. and they were hiring before 9/11. 9/11 really changed the airline industry, but before 9/11, the economy was going really well. You know, the Bill Clinton years and the Bill Gates years, the two Bills. You know, the economy was really charging. Basically, the internet was brand new, so there was like new markets opened up, and globalism really started to expand. So airlines were doing really well, and they were hiring a lot, and they were probably paying a big salary. So a lot of pilots at the Air National Guards were leaving, so they were hiring about 2 pilots a year to backfill because they thought that they needed that. But then after 9/11, the military pilots and the Air National Guard became really popular. So pilots were like staying in the National Guard, and so that it created a situation where there were too many pilots at the squadron, you know?
Yeah.
And
But you're already there at that point.
I was already hired and in the pipeline. So I was selected as a pilot training 2002, and they let me finish dental school. So I graduated from dental school in 2002. I took my board exam. So I was able to become board certified in Wisconsin and Iowa. And I got my board certification in both those schools. I took the board exam, and there's a practical exam and a written exam. And there's 2 parts to the board exam. So I went through all that and became a dentist, got the degree, got the certification, got the board exam done. So, and then like 6 months later, I was in pilot training. But I thought I wanted to be an oral surgeon at the time because I was also doing well in dental school, and I was in oral surgery residency, internship, oral surgery internship, which was like a rotation. You spend 3 months doing oral surgery with the oral surgery residents, mostly extractions, and then some exposure to other oral surgery, but most you're doing extractions. And during that time, I was interviewing with Air National Guard because I thought I wanted to try to become a pilot. And I knew that I could go to the Air National Guard and be a pilot while I was a dentist. And I got the call from Colonel Brandemule. Jose is his call sign. And he was the squadron commander in Wisconsin. And he called me up and he said, "Do you want to fly F-16s for Wisconsin Air National Guard?" And so when you get that call,
Yeah.
Of course you say yes.
For sure.
Yeah. And I remember where I was when he called me. I was I was renting a red barn in Coralville. So I was in the bedroom and listening to him. At the time, I remember I was also accepted at the Iowa Air National Guard. Right around the same time, they were like a couple months from each other. The squadron commander at the Iowa Air National Guard was killed in his own private plane. He was caught in some prop or jet wash from a heavy, probably like a cargo plane or something like that. And he did kind of like a ground loop and was killed. So there was some gaps there and some confusion about where I was going to end up. But I ended up in Wisconsin. And before I could just show up at Wisconsin, I needed to go through the undergraduate pilot training. I had the solo certificate, I was a private pilot, but I wasn't an Air Force pilot. And so I had to learn how to fly. At that time, it was a T-37.
How long did that take?
It was about 6 months in the T-37. And you're side by side with the instructor. And it's a jet, but it's not an afterburner. So it's a subsonic jet. And it's got like Hershey bar wings. And it's an awesome plane to learn to fly because the landing is really sweet. I loved landing it. It was really cool. And they grade you landing. There's someone out in a shack. They're they're watching your landings. And they're giving you scores every time you're flying. And they're listening to you on the radio. And then you got an instructor next to you. And you're constantly under grade sheets. You're under a lot of scrutiny. But I had been through dental school, and so it wasn't too hard for me. And some of the best pilots that I flew with were, Air Force Academy hockey players.
Yeah.
They were usually athletes, And hockey players, for example, like there's a lot of chaos in a hockey game. Baseball players deal with a lot of that. You have to be steady under pressure. They always did the best because they've had to adapt to like a dynamic, chaotic environment. Not always the smartest people, the bookworms that had not experienced that type of environment, they didn't always do the best, even though they were really smart. So kind of, you don't want a total meathead either, because you need to be able to do quick math, and you need to kind of have an idea of timing. So it was a big challenge for me. My brain doesn't really work, probably doesn't really work as a pilot in like a gamer. I don't know if have you ever played one of those big video games, like where it's like 3 screens and the guy that like knows where. Have you ever played those shooter games where they're like, I don't know, it's like Call of Duty or something like that? Have you ever played with some guys that are like really good and they know where everyone is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what it's like to be a fighter pilot.
So what kind of mindset do successful F-16 pilots share, or even fighter pilots?
The best thing I can say from layman's perspective, or, if you've had an experience of playing like Call of Duty or something like that, I think that, that is a big. Some other things that are important are chess, but like probably high speed chess. So you have to make decisions quickly, and you have to make the best decisions. So you have to gather information within a few seconds and make the call. So being decisive is important. So like sports like football and hockey are like that. I mean, high level soccer is probably like that too. Baseball. Baseball is pretty boring though. I mean, there's a lot of waiting and sitting. Football to me is the best preparation, I think. For example, like a NFL quarterback, you only have 20 seconds between plays, and then you're on the line. You probably have like 5 or 6 seconds to call an audible if you need to, and that's a lot of time in football. But you're basically hand signals, quick choreography, that kind of thing. So football is a great example of what it's like to be a fighter pilot, because it's changing, dynamic changes all the time. But yeah, I love the experience. It guided my life in so many ways.
Were there moments that you remember or recall in the jet that are those high stress or stressful situations?
Definitely.
What do those look like?
Well, I've been disoriented in the weather. I know how horrible that can be. It's terrifying. I mean, I've had situations where I've been disoriented in Texas. I mean, we did get weather, for the 3 days out of the year, but instrument flying is stressful.
And what's that?
Okay, so if you can imagine driving 65 miles an hour in your car and it's foggy and you can't see out the windows. So you basically can't see the road. You might be able to see, no, you can't see anything.
Yeah.
But you're just looking at your instruments and your speed, and you're trying to like use the computer to stay on the lines.
Yeah.
That's the kind of trust you need. But that's exactly what it's like to fly in a cloud. You can't see out the windows while you're flying. So your instruments are all telling you a picture of where you are in space. And when you're in that's rough. It's a tough day. Sometimes you're in a thunderstorm at night and you're trying to find a tanker, and you're tired. You've been flying for an hour and you're uncomfortable and you got to go to the bathroom. And
what does that look like in a fighter jet?
Well, I mean, there's a little to go to the bathroom, to go number one. Yeah. There's a little Ziploc bag, but it's shaped where you can, and inside it has like these kind of like kitty litter.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
But softer. Like it looks like gel inside.
Gotcha.
So you can use that if you need to, and but just being uncomfortable and tired and having to perform despite all that is something I learned. That's when really, things get difficult. So that was a big challenge. Something that I don't recommend for everyone. And there's a few people that love that challenge, so, I overall, though, I had a blast. The most stressful I've ever been in a plane is definitely spatial disorientation. It's a real problem. It's something that I take really seriously. And
what about when
yeah,
you mentioned that you can be upside down and not know it or be pulling?
Yeah, so usually your eyes are giving you visual cues of where the horizon is, and those are all gone. So if you can't see the horizon visually up and down, you're kind of using gravity, like the seat of your pants, and feeling the pressure of the weight of your body. So that's like level 2, or that's like your plan B. Your body's plan B is like how your body feels against the seat. And that can really, that's a bad way to know up from down. So if you look at your instruments, your seat might feel like you're straight up and down. But then if you look at your attitude indicator, which is, it uses a gyroscope to orient itself according to sky and ground, up and down.
Yeah.
And it might be sideways or inverted. So if you're pulling constantly, if the plane is pulling, you might be upside down and experiencing 1G as you're inverted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that just requires a steady pull. Like if you're doing a loop, you can be in 1G the whole time. And especially on high performance planes, jets, for example, or fighter planes, or training aircraft, or pretty high performance, it's way easier to get spatially or disoriented. But in like a Cessna, that's not as hard to do. That you can still wrap a Cessna into like a 60-degree bank turn, and you can experience some high G, but only like 2 or 3 at the most. It's only when you get into higher performance that you experience that to a greater degree. And so there's situations like that. Also, when you're close to the ground, when you're landing, I'd say landing an airplane is on a daily basis one of the most difficult.
Talk about the landing in Arizona.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think you were 2 weeks old or something like that. I mean, I think you were born like 3 weeks before that. No, maybe 4 weeks. But you were an infant, and I was flying a support mission. It was training, and I was supporting a 4-ship, and I took off, and about 15 to 20 minutes into the flight, received a warning of a hydraulic failure.
Really?
Yeah, and there's 2 hydraulic systems in the F-16. The A system and the B system, they're 2 separate systems, 2 separate pressures. The A system isn't a big deal, but the B system is a big deal because it controls your landing gear. So there's backups for when that system fails. Your landing gear is pretty heavy. It's held up under the belly of the airplane with some hooks, and it takes a lot of air pressure to pop those hooks open. And there's a backup system that uses an air bottle. It's kind of like a fire extinguisher. And the fire extinguisher is kind of in the front of the airplane. And when you pull the alternate gear released, it's going to use that air pressure to pop those hooks.
Mm.
So what was determined was that the air bottle was full. We check it before every plane flight. During pre-flight, we check that. But the air bottle released, but the pressure didn't get all the way down to the hooks. It leaked through the pipe because they discovered a loose bolt.
Wow.
So they determined that it was a torque problem. During the last inspection, the plane is taken apart to inspect, and that bolt was not torqued. So it kind of like a motorcycle vibration, like bolts kind of come loose.
Yeah.
So during taxi and takeoff and, ground operations, there's probably a lot of pressure on that landing gear, and it loosened the bolt. So the bolt was loose. Nobody noticed it. I didn't notice it. It's not very easy to notice because it's kind of up higher, and
Just one bolt.
Yep. I just checked the green arrow that the pressure was good. I didn't check all the bolts. They added a torque specification after that safety investigation, and it became a Class C mishap during that, because Class A mishap is total loss of the airplane or the loss of pilot's life. And Class B, at the time, Class B was over $100,000 of damage, and this was under $100,000 of damage. So yeah, that was something else. Yeah, I remember that really well too.
Wait, so you said 20 minutes into the flight, you got a warning?
Yeah, there was hydraulic pressure was 0. So the needle was at 0. And so I called to knock it off.
What's that?
Okay, so if you're in a fight and you have a real world problem, or you need to end the whole engagement, the training engagement, you call knock it off. You can imagine, like, if you're all playing football or everyone's playing a sport or a soccer game, and someone says knock it off.
Yeah.
It's going to get everyone's attention, right?
So you called that, and then
everybody stopped, and then they wanted to know what was going on, obviously. So I got a chase plane. So another pilot looked at my airplane, looked up and down, didn't notice anything wrong. And then we went immediately to the alternate field, which was Yuma. It actually is not Yuma. It was Gila Bend.
Okay.
Which is about 100 miles south of Phoenix. And so we circled at Gila Bend, got slow, lowered the gear handle. Nothing happened.
Really?
Yeah. So gear handled down, gear didn't come down, right?
Wow.
Yeah. When that happened, there was an alternate gear release procedure. And so I proceeded to pull that lever. When I pulled that lever, still no gear. And that's when it went from a normal emergency to something we hadn't seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that at that moment, that created, a pretty wild situation where nobody really knew what to do. It's not in the checklist.
Yeah.
It had happened during testing, like during experimental testing in the F-16 a long time ago in 1991 at MacDill Air Force Base, which MacDill doesn't exist anymore.
So it happened before.
It happened once before. I didn't know about any of this. I didn't know how to handle this emergency. It's not in the checklist. But fortunately, at that moment, we made a decision to climb to high altitude back home. And then in the meantime, we got on the phone with an engineer at Lockheed Martin. So the Lockheed Martin engineer, who at the time had a beeper out to eat, and he got a call that there was a pilot in trouble and airborne. They always have an engineer on call.
Mm.
And so he got on the phone with us, and they were able to conference him into our headset while I was flying.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So we were in a holding pattern above Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix at probably 35 to 40,000 feet. We were up really high so that we could preserve gas. So I was trying to stay airborne as long as I could because we needed to come up with a game plan. So now time was against us, and I was trying to figure out a plan with this engineer. And this guy gave me a lot of confidence. I don't know his name. I never asked.
Yeah.
I'd love to say thank you. He did a lot to save my life that day.
Yeah.
And he talked me through it. I remember he said to me that someone had landed with my configuration, which is a centerline fuel tank. It looks like a kayak under the plane. It's about a 2,000 pound tube. It looks like a bomb. People think it's a bomb, but it's just a gas container. And it's made out of aluminum, and it has baffles inside. So there's different chambers, and water or fuel can flow between.
Was that the immediate thought though? Was if you have to land it on that, it's going to blow up? Like,
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't think too much about it because I knew someone had done it. As soon as he told me that it had been done before and that you should land on the centerline fuel tank, initially I thought that my biggest hazard risk was sliding sideways on the land and then flipping.
Yeah.
Going probably like 60 to 100 miles an hour and tumbling and getting smashed and then blowing up.
Yeah.
And not being able to control my, because I don't have wheels.
Yeah.
So I imagine myself sliding sideways and then rolling.
And did he walk you through that process of like how to stop that?
Not really. He just said, keep it straight.
Okay.
And so the procedure was fly as straight as you can. Thankfully, it was a nice day. It was, crosswinds weren't a factor. If it was heavy crosswinds, it would have been difficult. And he also, wanted to say that ejecting and doing the ejection sequence out in the desert was an option.
So he gave you that option.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, flying out over the desert and then and taking the plane up slowly. I mean, probably like trying to get it as slow as possible, 100 miles an hour, probably something like that, 100 knots, and ejecting, taking the parachute down was something I thought had a lot more opportunity for, fouling it up.
Really?
Yeah. I opted to slide it in on the runway.
Rather than ejecting.
Right. Rather than ejecting.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think you would have done?
I mean, I don't even know, but definitely ejecting would be spooky.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not many people have ejected,
Mm-hmm. It's basically a rocket under your seat.
Yeah.
And the canopy pops open and you take a rocket up. Do you like that idea, or do you like sliding it on the centerline fuel tank?
I'm not the pilot, so
What do you think?
sliding it probably.
Yeah.
But ejecting it'd be an intense moment,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious though, were there other higher commands that gave you your options? Like,
I remember that, and I don't know if I told you this, but there was a wing commander, and I'm trying to think of his name. I want to say his name was Ward, last name Ward, but he told me that if I wanted to, I could eject. He just wanted me to know that I could eject if I needed to.
Mm-hmm.
I'd had about 68 hours in the jet, 65 hours, something like that. And so I was pretty young, pretty early in the F-16 training. So he said, hey, if you need to eject, go ahead, do it. Which, I said something stupid like, yeah, well, I'm feeling lucky today. I think I said that, which is kind of like, sounds pretty dumb, right? Like that's what a 24-year-old would say. Right?
Yeah.
But I think I said something like that, which I thought about later, and it seems silly right now. But the sliding it in on the runway, I never really considered ejecting very much. I didn't like that idea. So I think I wanted to save the airplane too. That weighed on me. I wanted to be able to save it. And I remember when we came in to land, there's a warning when you're below 150 knots and below 10,000 feet, the plane thinks you don't have your gear down. It's kind of like a dummy warning.
Oh, okay.
It's like, hey, dummy, like lower the gear.
Yeah.
And so it's like this beep, 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 beep.
So you have to land it with it.
Yeah. So it's beeping and you have to concentrate even though there's this beep, 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 beep. You can cancel that warning, but it comes back.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So you can cancel it for probably 20 seconds, I think. Maybe 30 seconds. I don't know. I had to memorize all these things, like alternate or all the release all the gear warning horn. You can cancel it. It comes back in 20 seconds. All that stuff was memorized.
Yeah.
Because there's a book that's an inch thick about the F-16 and how it was programmed, everything about it. So I had all this memorized at the time, but I remember I kept canceling it when I was on the approach.
Yeah.
And the video is on YouTube.
Yeah.
But I had a chase plane you can see on the video. And the landing, though, I think that I want to say that I've never been more focused in my life. I've never taken a half court shot at the end of a game. Have you ever done a buzzer beater?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know how focused you are there?
Yeah.
Okay. I've never played basketball at anything higher than junior high level like you have. So I don't know what that's like, but you know how everything slows down and you're like really focused the last few seconds. That's how I would explain it. That's what it was for me. So everything seemed really slow, moving really slow, and I was able to keep it as straight as I could, which worked out really well. It slowed down really fast. I remember, like, it was like immediately putting the brakes on. There was no aero brake like you have on fighter planes. It was just kind of like pretty flat.
It's pretty loud to hit the ground.
No, I didn't feel. It was pretty soft actually, and I didn't hear much. It was a lot like the gear was down. You know, it was maybe a little bit lower, but I remember just like slowing down quick. And then I also remember that I was trying to get the canopy up, and it just taken forever to get the canopy up. I think that was like time dilation. I was experiencing time dilation in a stressful moment where, you know, 5 seconds feels like 20 seconds.
Yeah.
I think it takes 8 seconds to depressurize the canopy and raise the canopy once you release the switch.
Well, why you were just trying to get out of the jet before like it blew up or something?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that it's going to catch fire.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking explosion. I'm just thinking there's basically a fire underneath me from the gas.
Yeah.
The gas tank that I'm just sliding. There's lots of sparks. There's a fire truck that's standing there. So I better get out of this plane.
Yeah.
Pretty quick, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking the soonest the next thing I need to do after it comes to a stop is like get out of the plane. So I'm pretty sure like right when that thing stopped, I was trying to raise the canopy and it was taking way too long for the canopy. So I thought maybe the stress from the landing had like bent the canopy rails. So there was something wrong with the canopy. So I was starting to think that like, oh boy, there's something wrong with this canopy. But it was just taking its time. It was taking its 8 seconds.
What's the protocol if the canopy won't go up?
I'm not sure. They're probably going to have to break it.
Yeah.
You know, the firefighters are probably going to have to break it and help me out. But it's made of Nalgene. You know, the Nalgene bottles?
No.
Like, you know, those clear drinking bottles from REI where the camping bottles that are like clear and you can drink out of them. That's called Nalgene, but it's probably like a 1/2 inch thick.
Okay.
You know, it's like acrylic or.
Yeah.
I don't know what an Nalgene is, but it's not glass and it can absorb like bird strikes and stuff like that. But that canopy's made out of Nalgene. And so I'm pretty sure it's not easy to get that open. I'm not sure how they would get it open. But thankfully, I think that they engineered it really well, that it's like not a problem. Like it's easy to get it open, you know? But it worked great, man. It was, it wasn't hard to hop out of that thing. You know, my adrenaline was pumping. I was probably over 100 beats per minute, just sitting there, you know, just thinking about it. So I slid and jumped and ran away from the jet and the fire truck. They told me, watch out because you might get hit by the fire truck. And it's true because whoever was driving that fire truck was not thinking about me.
Really? They were just thinking about the jet.
Yeah. They didn't know I was going to jump out or they weren't thinking about me.
Wow.
They were thinking about getting water on the plane. And so they did like a hard hook turn, you know, right around the plane, you know, which surprised me, you know.
Yeah.
It'd be like crossing the street and someone's doing a U-turn right in front of you. Yeah, and you're like, what the, you know, and like get it. Yeah. So you have to jump away from this big truck.
Yeah.
So I remember that happened. I had to like dodge the fire truck and I stood there on the runway and watched them spray spray water on the plane. And then they took me to the hospital, and I had to take like 8 vials of blood. I remember I got in the back of an ambulance.
Why is that?
They immediately did a blood test on me.
Because they were wondering if, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I mean, they want, that's standard procedure.
Yeah.
Whenever there's an emergency or like an investigation, they want to take the pilot's blood as soon as possible. So they want to make sure there's not alcohol in my blood or something like that.
Yeah.
So they took 8 vials of blood, and then I started answering questions about it. And they did a safety investigation. The investigation revealed that the bolt was the cause of the alternate gear release handle not lowering.
Were you kind of nervous at that point?
It's on file. Not overall. There was so much positive from the whole thing right away that I wasn't nervous about the investigation. I felt pretty confident. I didn't. Yeah, I could have. I guess I could have felt nervous about it. But I'm surprised that I wasn't more nervous than I was. But I felt like I did a really good job, so I that's why I wasn't nervous.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it was a Class C mishap, and I won the Air Force Safety Award, the Air Force Education and Training Command, AETC. And every quarter they have a safety award. And it was, I think, the second quarter of 2004. And anyway, it's on the board. I've got the trophy in the office.
Yeah.
And then I got a letter from a general saying thank you. And the plane was up flying the next month.
Really?
Yeah, they basically took a flatbed truck, and they have some inflatable, something to inflate under the wings. And then they have hard points that they can get it jacked up, jack up the wings. So they lifted it on the back of a truck, took it to the hangar, and then were able to kind of suspend it in the air and look underneath it. And then they discovered that the bottle was empty, but then the bolt was loose. So they said that they replaced the bottle. The first thing they did was they replaced the bottle with a new bottle and tightened that bolt and tried it again, and it worked. So that's why they determined that the torque setting on that bolt had to be changed. So
Have you heard about
the
that?
tech order changed.
Have you heard about that happening after you?
No, I haven't.
Mm.
I'd like to know.
Yeah.
We can ask ChatGPT if it's happened again.
Maybe.
Yeah, but the report, it was kind of funny, the news report. There was a lot of news reports all over the place, like pilot rents the plane out of gas, and there's a lot of misunderstandings.
Really? The media there were some other ones that just didn't get it right, huh?
The media didn't get it right. No. They didn't know though.
Yeah.
And at the time social media hadn't exploded yet, but there was a media report, and then there was on the news media, there was like, you could comment, and I saved that for you. It's hanging in the garage. I printed off all those comments.
Oh.
So a lot of people that commented said, hey, I know the pilot. This is what really happened. And he did a great job.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I got to show you that.
Yeah.
Thank you, dear friends, for listening to the latest podcast. This time was a great pleasure to have my oldest son, Oscar, with me. I want to leave you with a quote from Winston Churchill. When you're 20, you care about what everyone thinks. When you're 40, you stop caring about what everyone thinks. And when you're 60, you realize that no one was thinking about you to begin with. Have a great one. I'll see you on the other side.